Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Catherine Bradley. I'm a senior consultant at the Audience Agency. And in this session, I'll be talking you through how to create an audience development plan. For the purposes of the camera, I am a white female with fair, shortish hair and glasses. So the focus of this session is taking you through a structure to work with and highlighting the things to consider. We'll send all the slides out after the session, and these have got lots of kind of information about the main concepts and lots of links to further resources as well. So you'll be able to pick all that up after the session when those are sent out by email. Just to start with a brief introduction to who we are. The Audience Agency is a not-for-profit charity. We work in the UK and internationally. And underpinning our work is a collaborative principle of sharing data and knowledge about audiences. We run the Audience Answers data and development tool, and our bespoke work includes formative research, audience development planning and consultancy, supporting audience-centered innovation and change. So we're going to start with a consideration of what is audience development. Audience development is widely defined as a process to increase or to change for the better the numbers engaging, the diversity of audience, and the depth or scope of people's engagement. The Audience Agency's definition is that audience development is a planned organisation-wide approach to extending the range and nature of relationships with the public by focusing on their needs. It helps a cultural organisation to achieve its social purpose, financial sustainability, and creative ambitions. There are a number of other definitions out there too, but these tend to have a common thread, and that is audiences at the heart of planned decision-making across the whole organisation. And we very much use audiences as a term in its broadest sense. So that can include all the people who engage with an organisation. That might be in person, online, as an audience member, as a visitor, a participant, a community member, or another type of stakeholder. Broadly, there are three ways to develop your audiences. The first of those is more. So that's more of the same type of audience, and that's about increasing footfall. Broader reach, that's reaching new types of people. And then lastly, deeper engagement with existing audiences. So encouraging the people who already engaged with you to do more with you, such as visit more frequently, engage with different offers, or perhaps donate or become an advocate for your organisation. And your audience development plan may well involve all of these in consideration of different types of audience and your different strategic priorities. Cultural organisations work with a quite unique triple bottom line and are always in the position of balancing priorities across the artistic and cultural, the financial and the social, with audiences at the heart of success in all of these areas. And your artistic and cultural ambitions are at the heart of what you do and your purpose. And ultimately, it's about engaging people with these. Social objectives around reaching people are determined maybe internally and might be influenced by funders and other stakeholders. And audiences are at the centre of bringing income into an organisation, whether that's through ticket sales, ancillary spends such as your shop or cafe, and indirectly via initiatives to reach audiences that open up access to funding streams. So taking a strategic approach to audience development planning helps to see how engaging different types of audience can support delivery of these different priorities, spanning the priorities of funders and other stakeholders and internal priorities across departments, as well as helping to break down potential or perceived conflicts between different priority areas. This is the broad audience development planning process we're following during this session, and it's supported by a wide range of resources. There's links to these at the end. There's also a link on this slide to our guide to audience development planning. Audience development requires an investment of time from your organisation, but it's very much a flexible process and one that you can follow and adapt to meet your own needs. What's really key to success is that the process is informed by real evidence and includes the space and time for reflective learning as part of a continual cycle of improvement and change. So let's consider for a second why you need an audience development plan. This Terry Pratchett quote sums up the importance of planning for the future that's rooted back to your organisation's core purpose and an understanding of the current situation you're in. If you do not know where you come from, then you don't know where you are. And if you don't know where you are, then you don't know where you're going. And if you don't know where you're going, you're probably going wrong. So what are the features of effective audience development planning? Targeted activities can often occur in the cultural sector as part of a funded project or result from the focus of specific teams or areas of service delivery. But effective audience development planning is an ongoing and inclusive strategy for change that helps you to move away from focusing on projects or campaigns. It's mission-led and helps to balance your priorities in different areas of organisational development, supporting delivery on your social purpose, your financial sustainability, and creative or curatorial practice ambitions. It's also empowering as it helps you to say no when activity doesn't support your mission. Delivery can be fragmented across different teams, and good audience development planning is organisation-wide, and it integrates departments and operations across your organisation to move towards common goals. It uses evidence, not assumptions, to inform decision-making. And it addresses how to use different strategies to engage different sorts of audience, encompassing both existing and new audiences. Users are consulted and involved, placing audiences in an understanding of their needs right at the centre of the process. And it helps you to make best use of the often limited resources available to target activity at the people you really want to reach. And lastly, it's about long-term relationships and development, so a continuous process of review, ensuring continuing relevance. It also supports a measured response to the unexpected. There are lots of different ways to create an audience development plan, and the main thing really is that it must work for your organisation and be a useful tool that helps you in your work. And it needs to help you to understand the impact of any changes you put in place and help you to reflect on your progress, adjust things that aren't working quite as you want to, as well as celebrate your successes. So moving on now to consider mission, purpose and goals. Identifying your organisational purpose is often one of the hardest things to do, and different people within an organisation or within a team may have different perspectives depending on their understanding of priorities, thinking back to that triple bottom line, for example. But it is crucial to any strategic planning. Really, identifying your purpose can be empowering. It allows you to question whether something you're being asked to do or want to do yourself will contribute to the delivery of your overall purpose, and how. It also supports a targeted use of resources. You're less likely to use time or money on ad hoc projects that have no long-term impacts or legacy in terms of developing your organisation. And once you've gone through the process of defining and exploring your purpose, the next step is to devise the audience goals that support it. These translate the higher aims and ambitions of the organisation into broad audience goals, and they should be aligned with top-level business objectives. There'll likely be a combination of financial goals, social, educational or experiential, reputational and creative. So there's a couple of examples of how this might work on the screen. So you might have an overall aim to be inclusive. That might translate into audience goals such as we listen to and learn from local communities, or we're a place where everyone feels welcome, whoever they are. You might have an aim to be financially resilient. That might translate into an audience goal that says we can maximise income from those that can afford it. Moving on now to analysing your current situation. So where are you starting from? Analysis of your current situation helps to ensure informed development. And one really critical area to include in analysing your current situation is your current audiences. Understanding who engages with you, where they come from, which parts of your organisation's offer do they engage with, and how often. Using insight from sources such as an audience survey, a ticketing system, participation records, and digital analytics, you can set benchmarks for current audience engagement. And that might be across your in-person, digital, and participatory audiences as appropriate to your organisation. One of the most useful ways of combining your findings is to create a clear segmentation, using insight to group people by distinct needs that you can respond to. So you might start that by identifying the groups that are important to you, then layering up data and insight to build a picture of their characteristics, their needs, and their values. It can be quite an iterative process. You can begin with a hypothesis and plan to add evidence over time if you don't have everything to hand yet. You might, for example, identify groups such as infrequent attenders for large-scale, high-profile events who are travelling from further than 45 minutes away, or regular families who make more than 2 visits a year that are interested in participatory activities and live within your local area. Taking on board these points will help to ensure your segments are fit for purpose. So firstly, do you have the evidence and know enough about them? And are you using real evidence, not assumptions? Are there enough of these people to make your activities worthwhile? Are they reachable? Do you know where to find them and how to communicate with them? And are they homogenous? Do they share enough of the same characteristics to be targeted with the same activities and messages? There are lots of links at the end to further resources supporting segmentation, so hopefully they'll be useful. And just to think as well, a segmentation of your audience is not the same as a segmentation of the population, like audience spectrum, though you can use it and tools like it to understand your own audience groups. So let's take a look at audience spectrum. Well, audience spectrum segments the UK population on the basis of their engagement with and their attitudes towards arts and culture. It's highly geolocatable, and each UK household has a segment assigned to it. It's based on a wide range of data sources. They include national depth survey taking part, cultural proximity indices that look at where people live in relation to cultural offers, demographics from census data, and wider consumer data from Experian, as well as the audience answers data set. There are 10 segments, 3 highly engaged with culture, shown in orange, 3 with medium or more occasional engagement, shown in green, and 4 less engaged in blue, which in many cases may form the focus for outreach work. And last year we launched 20 new subsegments as well, and they break down each of the 10 groups into 2 subsegments. So that's giving it more nuance to help you to understand your current audiences better and to be able to target new audiences within the population in a more nuanced way. Within each of these broad kind of high, medium and low engaged bands within audience spectrum, each group demonstrates differences in behaviour, in preferences, in opportunities and in needs and barriers. You can determine how many of your audience fall into each audience spectrum group with full postcodes from either your surveys or booking systems, either via audience answers, or we can do this as a bespoke audience spectrum analysis. I'm not going to explore audience spectrum in any more depth now, but there are a really wide range of resources to support you to use the tool. That includes detailed pen portraits for each segment, and that allows you to understand their preferences, attitudes, behaviour, needs and barriers. And there's a link here on the screen to those if you're not already familiar with those. So going back to the situational analysis phase of audience development planning, other areas to explore include your current service or programme offer. So establishing what you do for different types of audiences, what's working well and who it's working for at the moment, as well as what's not working so well at the moment. Also current marketing activities and their effectiveness, looking at your existing channels and messages, where you have this information already, their reach, effectiveness and return on investment. And where you don't yet have all the evidence you need to really fully understand your current situation, look to set audience goals within your audience development plan that focus on addressing this. Then moving from your starting point into where you want to be. So set out the audiences you want to reach and why, and these should link back to your mission and your audience goals. Establish what your target audiences are looking for and how you will reach them. There's a really wide range of insights available to explore what the population looks like in your catchment. And these can be compared to your current audiences to identify where there's scope for development and direction around the broader, deeper or more audience focuses. The types of data you can use to look at opportunities in your catchment population include area profile reports, and these bring together data from Experian and the Office for National Statistics about the population in a defined area. And they cover demographics as well as cultural engagement. You can find out more about these on our website at the link here on this slide. And if you're in Scotland, you can also access your regional area profile report for free via the Audience Finder Scotland site. Again, there's a link on the screen here that's supported by Creative Scotland. Audience spectrum segmentation is also included in the area profile reports, and we always include a population comparator alongside audience spectrum profiles of your own audience as well. There's also a really useful audience spectrum population mapping tool, more on that in a moment. Sources such as local authority population data can also be useful. And if you're in an area with significant tourism, then tourism agencies can often provide insights about who's visiting your area, developmental priorities for tourism in the area, as well as any changing tourism trends. So you can view the distribution of audience spectrum segments in the population in a brand new mapping tool in Audience Answers. You might be familiar with the older version of this in the Audience Find dashboard, but we've just launched a brand new version within the Audience Answers tool. There's a link to get to that on the screen here. You don't need to be logged in to Audience Answers to use it. Anyone can just visit the site and use it. And it gives a really good visual view of dominant segments in each area. So you can see here what the national view looks like. You can also zoom in on individual postal areas for a breakdown of everybody living within that postal area. And you can also then go into a particular segment to see how many live in a particular area from that segment. And this includes as well the breakdown for the new audience spectrum subsegments, as you can see represented on the screen here. So in this example for Kaleidoscope Creativity, it's showing you how many within subsegment K1 and K2 live within the postal area CF43. The wider environment in which your organisation operates will directly affect your ability to engage audiences and the opportunities available to you. So exploring wider contextual data should be an important part of your situational analysis. And this will include looking at sector and area benchmarks. For example, you can do that through sector reporting and the Audience Answers tools. And through this type of data, you can look at how your audience compares and establish where there may be missed opportunities. Considering your unique selling points and positioning as part of a competitor analysis will also help you to identify competitive advantages, disadvantages, as well as collaborative opportunities that might affect or support you in meeting your goals. And there's an example of a competitor map shown on the screen here. There's a really wide range of benchmarking data available via the Audience Answers and audience agency sites that provide national art form and regional context that you can place alongside your own findings to enhance your understanding of market potential. And actively understanding and keeping on top of changed opportunities in light of the pandemic and the cost of living crisis will also be critical at the moment. In addition to what your own audience analysis tells you about change behaviour, there's a wide range of national data available. That includes the Cultural Participation Monitor. That's a survey that's been operating in waves since autumn 2020, and it samples the whole population and explores physical and digital cultural engagement and intentions. It's also adapted in each wave to respond to particularly kind of points of interest at the time as things change, as we progress through a very changeable period. So the chart here is an example from that research, and this shows from the latest wave in spring 2023, by age, what proportion of the population have attended culture in the last year, and how many are attending less than pre-pandemic. Another example from that research shown here, this chart, again from spring this year, shows how much the cost of living crisis and fear of COVID-19 is putting people off attending cultural events. So data like this might lead you to explore how you can help to remove financial barriers to accessing your organisation and consider value for money across all aspects of a visit. It also might help you to consider the likely ongoing impact of COVID-19 on attendance, what you might be able to put in place to mitigate this. There's a lot more from the Cultural Participation Monitor on the Audience Agency website, and you can explore that much further via the link on the page. So just showing a quick snapshot here, but there's lots on our website that you can access there to support your planning. One especially useful tool for analysing your organisation's current situation is a SWOT analysis. And undertaking a SWOT particularly focused on factors affecting audiences and your ability to engage and develop different types of audience can be a very useful stage in the planning process. And it works particularly well when you get input from across your organisation, so lots of different perspectives. So the SWOT explores internal strengths and weaknesses and external opportunities and threats. And also useful for further interrogating your external environment is the PEST analysis. And this includes political, that might include things such as government interventions and policies. Economics, such as disposable income among the population, unemployment, economic growth. Social, which might include demographics, behaviours, cultural barriers, attitudes within the population. And then technological, such as innovations in technology that might affect what you do or the opportunities available to you, as well as technological access and awareness in your potential market. I'd like to move on now to focus on what it means to take an audience-centered view of your offer. What you offer and how you talk about it can make a big difference to who you engage with. A good example of how that works in practice is considering features, so those are the facts about your offer, and the benefits, the different reasons why different people will want to engage with it. And in some cases, and for some audience groups, these might look really quite similar, but in others, very different. For example, looking at the screen here, we've included a few examples. So for some audiences, the features of an 18th century house and garden might also be the benefit to engage. For others, the benefit might be relaxing space to escape from everyday life. So really considering the features and the benefits of different groups can be an incredibly useful way of becoming more audience focused in your thinking. In practice, audience development means inviting people to do something. And in thinking about the people you need to reach to achieve your goals, it's good to question if you really understand how they see your organisation, what they want and need from you, how to invite them, and what you might need to change to reach and engage people. The user journey includes digital as well as physical touch points. So dig into what channels your target audiences use, how they find out information and make decisions. The image here is from a digital touchpoints research project we did with the National Gallery, and there's a link there if you want to read more about that on our website. Considering the many audience touchpoints across the physical and digital is incredibly useful to understand the different ways in which people interact with your organisation, the impressions they get at each, and what they need from you. And you might need to be prepared to make some significant changes in order to engage some of your target groups, as well as taking on board a design thinking approach that involves starting with insight and consultation to find out more about the needs of target groups. And then a process of designing or co-designing with those groups new offers to meet their needs, a process of testing ideas to see whether they're fit for purpose, how people respond to them, and then revising based on feedback. So moving on to the next phase, strategic planning. So strategies are the approaches to meet your audience goals and to reach your, to meet your audience goals, essentially. So the things that you will put, the things that you will do, and the things that you will put in place in order to achieve those goals. Your strategic planning should in particular think about breaking down into targeted approaches for different audiences and thinking about specific goals in those breakdowns as well. So what strategies you're going to put in place for those specific, for the audiences you want to reach and the goals that you are hoping to achieve. They should also consider a way to account for any inconsistencies between artistic ambitions and the potential to engage target audiences as well. And they should cover approaches to developing the experience, to programming, and as well as communications and marketing. So really think about strategies in a holistic way across all areas of what you do as an organization. Think in particular about how you can maximize the potential of your offer, the benefits of engaging from the audience perspective, as we touched on before, as well as legacy planning. So considering areas such as audiences, advocacies, and the communities. What's the kind of longer term reach and implication of the strategies that you're putting in place? There are lots of tools available to help you to identify strategies and to think about the mix of strategies across your organization. And one that we found to be particularly effective is the Ansoff Matrix. You may be familiar with using this already. So the Ansoff Matrix was originally devised in 1957 by Igor Ansoff as a strategic business development tool. And it can be a really useful way to start to break down and map out more complex audience development strategies into essentially what you will do and for who. And the other really useful thing about the Ansoff Matrix is that it helps you to get a balance of strategies across your organization and to understand the balance between new and existing programs and new and existing audiences, and make sure that you're thinking about all of those things within your audience development planning. The matrix includes 4 main approaches, and they're based on a combination of new and existing audiences and new and existing offers. So market penetration in the bottom left of the box is concerned with further expansion of current audiences with current offers. So it's what you know works well and is enjoyed by your current audiences. And approaches in this box might include things like developing loyalty through membership, volunteering, increasing secondary spend, and encouraging more frequent visits. It might also be about increasing footfall and income through reaching more of the same type of audience by promoting your offer in areas where they're concentrated. Market development in the top left is about presenting your current offer in a way that will attract new types of visitor. And the approach here is focused on engaging more and different people with the work that you already do. So that might be reaching out to new geographical areas. That might be presenting the offer in a way that appeals to a different type of attender. It might be about developing your welcome to make new people feel more welcome in your existing environment to existing offers. It might be about different marketing and messaging and marketing channels as well. Offer development in the bottom right is about creating new products and experiences for current audiences. And the approach here centers on encouraging existing audiences to do more and different things with your organization. That might include incentives to encourage people to try a new type of show, for example, or current visitors to one site to visit a different site if you have multiple sites. It might be about programming new and extended events such as talks, tours, or online events designed for your existing audience and encouraging them to engage with you in a different way. And then lastly, the top right is diversification. So this is the development of new offers for new audiences. And it's very much the riskiest area because it's all unknown. It tends to be the most resource intensive as well, but it can be where some of the really rewarding development work happens. And approaches in this box might be funded projects, which should be identified in line with your strategic goals. It might be an opportunity for application of a design thinking approach to develop a whole new strand of offer, such as co-created content, newly commissioned work, or a new collecting area. We've just got some examples now of projects by real organisations that have taken place that fit into each of these 4 boxes. So up in the top left, we'll start with market development. So that's about taking an existing offer and reaching new audiences with that. So an example there is Barnsley Museums. So during the pandemic, they maximised the appeal of their existing outdoor spaces to attract new and higher numbers of visitors than they'd seen in previous years. So they were seeking new people and engaging more people, and particularly it was people who were seeking time in the natural environment during the pandemic. There's a link there to that particular focus, but also some other work that they were doing during the pandemic, and a case study on our website you can link through to there if you're interested. Then if we go down to the market penetration, so that's existing offers and existing audiences. So Theatr Brycheiniog, excuse my Welsh pronunciation. For the theatre, their objective was better engagement with their existing audiences through implementation of a targeted and evidence-based led approach to communications. So a new strategy which was trying to get away from a sort of one-size-fits-all approach to communications. And the theatre had already invested in audience spectrum licensing. So that's within their ticket sold box office system. So that's where the a service that we offer that where the audience spectrum segments are directly input into the system itself, so that you can see which segment each of your customers fits into essentially within your system. And they identified patterns within their own audiences for their main audience spectrum groups. And they did that through a combination of using the data from their ticketing system, as well as the free audience agency data tools, which I'm introducing many of throughout this session. And then as a result of that, and using the insights they'd gained, they created bespoke season launches for each of their 4 main audience spectrum groups. And those focused particularly on highlighting the events that were most likely to appeal to that group. And they used evidence about the needs of those groups to appeal to their preferred tone of voice, for example, and include contextual information that was likely to be of interest in their communications. Offer development in the bottom right. So this is an example of developing new offers to appeal to existing audiences. So we have a project here from the National Archives, and they were interested in how they could engage existing audience groups through their exhibitions. So at the Audience Agency, we supported them with focus group research into the needs of 2 existing groups. And those are groups that were defined by their bespoke segmentation model. The first of those was cultural devotees, and that's a group that particularly seek arts and cultural links or activities connected to the archives, as well as sort of unique experiences, interesting and unique experiences. And then the second group was called Curious Minds, and that was a group that was particularly seeks depth of information from the archives. They want intellectual stimulation, so quite different motivations for engaging with the National Archives. And the research with these 2 groups explored development of new offers and exhibitions to appeal to each group. And this approach was used to develop quite a number of exhibitions at the National Archives. They include the 1920s Beyond the Raw exhibition. And in this exhibition, the offers developed for the Cultural Devotees group included an experiential 1920s nightclub reconstruction. For Curious Minds, deep information and documentation, such as information focused on the 1921 census. That did include as well information from the census within the nightclub, describing the real individuals who attended the club. So they kind of combined as well both of these elements into one, which they found appealed to both of these groups. And the last example is diversification. So thinking about new programs for new audiences. And this is an example from Music in the Round in Sheffield. So Music in the Round wanted to reach a younger and a more ethnically diverse audience than their core audience. And they also wanted to create an audience for contemporary music in Sheffield. So they developed Sounds of Now, which was a new contemporary music series, and it features new music from a wide and more diverse range of composers and performers. So it includes concerts in a wide range of venues and different types of concert experience. That includes sort of more intimate concert experiences, as well as quirky venues, for example. And this program is showing success in attracting the younger and more ethnically diverse audiences that were intended. And it's actually developed now as an ongoing program strand, and it takes place at a range of Sheffield venues and tours as well to other venues outside of Sheffield. So there's links of some sort either to case studies or to the organisation's own information for all of those case studies if you are interested in looking into any of those further. So how to balance in-person and online strategies might be something that many organisations have been facing much more over the last few years in the light of changes, in particular in the way that people engage with culture during the pandemic. An empathy map can be a really useful tool to consider how your target audiences behave, both physically and digitally. And we've put a link here to an example for one of those. The critical point here is really to work back from your audience goals to see where digital cultural delivery, content and communications enable you to meet those goals. So rather than doing digital for digital's sake, always linking back to where you want to get to as an organisation. And then testing your digital content by constantly evaluating and testing with real users. And whilst this absolutely applies to your physical offers too, it might be a particular consideration for digital content where you might be doing something new. And in particular, where opportunities and expectations are evolving at such a fast pace. I'm going to move on now to setting objectives. So objectives define what success looks like and how you can measure it. And ideally, your objectives should be as smart as possible. So the S, specific, the goal is clearly defined and unambiguous. They're measurable. They use concrete evidence to measure achievement. Could be through a wide range of sources. They're achievable, something that's challenging but isn't out of reach. You don't want to set yourself up for failure in objective setting. And relevant, the goal must matter to your organisation and relate back to its mission. And then lastly, timetabled, so grounded within a time frame and incorporating a clear delivery date, so you know sort of when you hope to have achieved that goal by. Just thinking for a moment about setting digital objectives in particular. So social media and website analytics can give us too much data. So really here, concentrate on data which will help you to answer the questions that you're asking. And benchmarking is key really here to understanding what is working and what isn't working. So what does success mean to you? Is it a target amount of people attending a live stream talk, for example? Is it people attending a performance? Is it enough people clicking on a link in your post to buy a ticket? Is it building a community that talks to you? And when you're setting objectives, think about if and how you can measure these and how you can act on the findings to make changes to improve as well. So being able to act on those findings is really important. And making decisions based on your analytics is very much an iterative process. So regularly review what is working, interrogate what isn't working, and adapt to objectives as appropriate to your findings. Moving on now from objectives into the action planning phase, and this relates to setting out what you will do and when. It sets out a timetabled, budgeted and resource range of activities designed to meet your goals and objectives. So the engagement mix can be a really useful concept to approach your action planning. It brings together the traditional 4 Ps of marketing: product, price, promotion, and place, with the 3 Cs of community engagement, focused on involving people in dialogue, in exploration, and in decision making. So the marketing mix, or the 4 Ps of marketing, represent the main elements in meeting people's needs to engage them with what you do. And these are really the main factors that will influence people's decisions and their ability to engage with your organization. So starting in the top left with your product or program, this should consider the whole offer. And critically here, be clear about what aspects of your program are aimed at different target audiences. Your place in the bottom left is where activities take place, at what times, how people access them. It could include physical or digital place, practical aspects such as booking facilities, your staff and your welcome, as well as aspects such as the environment and any social space that you might be able to provide as part of your experience. And in the top right, price, the right price or pricing approach is what's important here, and that might be free to meet the needs of the target audience. And price should very much be thought of across all areas, so including maybe tickets, catering, shop, car parking, etc. And then lastly, in the bottom right is promotion. So this is the online and offline channels and methods to communicate opportunities to engage with your organisation. So which are relevant for you and for reaching which of your target audiences and for which programmes of activity. And across all of this, think about what evidence you need to inform your understanding across the 4 Ps. So that might come from consultation and research. It might come from looking at external data, population data, or the audience spectrum profiles, for example. The 3 Cs of community engagement are focused on meaningful and sustainable interactions with communities and two-way communications or relationships. Community involvement might include things like forums for decision-making, volunteering, for example, where you're directly engaging members of the community in those types of contexts. Content could be creative or exploratory content, but critically it's talking about content that's designed specifically for the communities you want to engage with. And then co-creation, active participation in devising, creating or curating cultural experiences. So working directly with communities in a proactive way to do that. And just some questions to raise here. So what are you already doing to involve people in decision-making, action and creation? And what else do you need or want to do? Particularly enable you to reach your overall aims and to address your audience goals. We just got here an example of an action planning template. I'm not going to talk about this in a lot of detail, but in bringing all of this together that we've spoken about so far, you might be looking at this sort of template. So you're setting out your audience goal, you're setting out the strategies that you're going to put in place to achieve that goal. There's a clear SMART objective set out against those as well, so you can see exactly what you're hoping to do and when you're hoping to do it by. Setting out your target groups, so being really clear about who this activity is aimed at. And then the specific actions that you're going to put in place in order to realise the strategy. The timescales they will work towards, and then responsibilities within your team for making that happen as well. Just moving now to the final sort of phase in the planning process, which is review. And this is really the process of measuring whether you've achieved what you set out to do. It's concerned with measuring progress towards objectives, and the smarter your objectives, the easier this is. In thinking about the review, one quite important question is often who you need to collect evaluation data for, and kind of considering that early on in the planning stages around the review data that you're going to be collecting. So that's likely to include internal people within your organisation, funders, but perhaps other wider partners and stakeholders as well. And then picking the right tools to measure success. And that's obviously going to vary wildly depending on what it is you're trying to do, but it might include survey data, ticketing system, digital analytics, perhaps a web survey, as well as qualitative methods. And then building in time to review regularly and communicate findings to the rest of your organisation. And the audience development process is not a static thing. Your plan shouldn't really be viewed as a kind of static plan. It's something that's live, that's continually being reviewed and adapted in response to the information you're collecting, the insights and the success of the initiatives you're putting in place. So building in the time to review, adjust or adapt your plan in response to the data you're collecting is important part of the cycle, and ensuring your organisation and your plan are relevant and continue to remain so. Just leading on from that thought, I'd just like to finish with two short sections. And the first of those is a consideration of what it means to future-proof your audience development plan. So I don't think we could have imagined the shocks and stresses of the last few years in quite the way that they have been or are currently happening. And being aware of the possibility of unexpected change has perhaps never felt so important as it does now. Future-proofing is the process of anticipating the future and developing methods of minimising the effects of shocks and stresses of future events, according to Wikipedia. Future-proofing is a really substantial topic in its own right, and I only really have time to touch on it briefly now. We've put a dictionary definition up here on the screen, and I think some of the key words I'd like to highlight here are design and change. And these really encompass the idea of building in flexibility, agility and review in response to the changing environments around us. The concept of double loop learning might also be useful to consider. This involves changing goals and actions in light of experience. So being genuinely dynamic and having a readiness to change in response to learning. In single loop learning, we make inferences about another person's behaviour without checking whether they are valid. And we may advocate an organisation's existing views without fully questioning, explaining or illustrating the reasoning behind that. So single loop learning is something which is theoretical, but it's not experiential. And organisations can often get stuck in repeated attempts at making the same approaches work. So without questioning if they're the right approaches and without going back and questioning the goals behind them. An example of that might be a theatre continuing to try and sell tickets for a type of show that has never sold well. And the emphasis might be on trying to boost sales, but with no depth of understanding about why that show isn't selling within that community. So they're constantly going through the same cycle of trying to make something work, but without really understanding the underlying issues behind it. Double loop learning includes the views and experiences of participants, and theories should be made explicit and tested. Positions should be reasoned and open to exploration by others. It's experiential and it's future effective, and it moves the mental model on which decisions are made away from the mindset of what we've always done and questions fundamental approaches based on experience. And that drives innovation and solutions that are genuinely fit for purpose. COVID has given us a lot of examples of taking on board learning and experience to respond to unexpected situations. A good example of that is organisations having turned approaches around and explored and discovered through experience as well as consultation how they can engage audiences constructively online as well as in person in the longer term as well as in the short term. One example of the double loop learning concept in practice is the Peterborough Presents CPP, Creative People and Places. That's a project we've evaluated over a number of years. To begin with, the project looked really successful. There were lots of people attending events. There were really high ratings from those people attending about the events they went to. But on looking more closely at the data, it showed that they were not really engaging with the low culturally engaged communities that the CPP programs are supposed to. So they turned things around, and whilst their overall CPP and Peterborough Presents aims remain the same, they changed their strategy substantially. They focused on hyperlocal work directly in communities and also developed a community commissioning scheme, and that went beyond the big public events. For example, resulted in a commission including an artist design set of bird boxes for the local area, which met 2 objectives. If you're interested in that project, you can read more on that on our website at the link at the bottom of the page here. I spoke earlier about the importance of bringing the whole organisation on board, and this is really fundamental to ensuring that your audience development plan is fit for purpose, that it considers all areas of audience engagement and experience, and that the really valuable knowledge of the staff within your organisation is included in the process as well as that there's very much a commitment to delivery of the plan across the organisation, which can be another big challenge. So how would you go about this process of bringing your whole organisation on board? And this is an area we support organisations with quite a bit. So one of the things is that involvement is key, and particularly consultation at all stages of the process. So right through from conversations about your purpose, setting audience goals, right through to sharing and discussing findings from your review process. And genuinely listen and take on board what people say. If you can't take someone's suggestion on board, tell them why. So two-way, very much a kind of process of two-way feedback throughout to make staff feel listened to. Relate the planning process to individuals or teams' own work. So ask them for input, involve them in a really proactive way in defining the implications for their team. Involve them in generating ideas about how their team contribute to achieving audience goals. And remember too that teams don't experience change the same way. The diagram here sets out the variety of people and behaviours you might expect to deal with. So think about where different teams and individuals might sit. For example, how can you use the champions to bring others in the organisation on board? How can you minimise the effect of the saboteurs and the critics? Can you bring them on board through a different approach, through perhaps more direct involvement, by framing things in a different way, for example, or for example, perhaps you can bring the target audience groups to life so that they can get on board with those a little bit better. And just lastly, a useful tool to consider here is RACI. And this is a framework that can be used for different elements of your plan to make it very clear who has, first of all, the responsibility for carrying out different areas, who has the overall authority for making things happen or making sure things happen, who needs to be consulted and their opinions considered, and who needs to just simply be informed of what we'll do, of what you will do, what to do, or what will happen. Thank you. That's all of my content to talk through today. I just wanted to say we've got at the end of the slide deck, we've got 2 pages here of links through to further resources. So quite a lot of the resources I've mentioned throughout the session and some other kind of useful case studies and links there. So hopefully you'll find those helpful. And then lastly, there's just a slide on some of the services that we can offer to help and how to get in touch with us if you're interested in taking that any further. Thank you very much for listening.